You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
Newly elected Mayor Harrell, City of Seattle, just extended out the eviction moratorium on residential housing in the City of Seattle for another month. It's been kicked out. It's been extended out 6 times already by previous Mayor Durkin. We're going to go one more round of 30 days. And Mayor Harrell is saying, well, we're going to do a little study on this. We need to figure out what the best approach is. I think what you've got going on here is that the mayor, who was elected based on him being a moderate, if he comes in guns blazing and says, nope, that eviction moratorium that we've already extended out 6 times, it's gone, it's done. I think people are going to take that. They're going to take offense to that. And in City of Seattle, I wouldn't take offense to that. I'd say, hey, that's long overdue. This moratorium should have never been put in place in the first place. Plus, Seattle already have an eviction moratorium during the cold months of winter. In December, January, until the end of February, you can't evict people in Seattle for non-payment of rent. You can evict them for some other stuff, causing damage, being a nuisance, breaking the law. You can evict them for that. But non-payment of rent during the dark winter months of Seattle, which we don't really have any, let's be honest. That's why so many people want to live here, because our weather is pretty moderate. Yeah, it's gray. Yeah, it sucks. That's why so many people go to Hawaii or they go to Arizona or Florida. Although Florida, it's a stretch. It's a long flight. It's like a 7.5-hour flight. But I digress. We've got an eviction moratorium. Mayor Harrell is basically saying, okay, yeah, we're going to extend this through another month, and then we're going to reevaluate, and it goes through until mid-February. So you've got this current eviction moratorium, but we've already got one in place. So my feeling is, and a large part of that, I think, is also looking at the cases of Omicron. Now, we all know that Omicron is not nearly as deadly. It's not putting nearly as many people in the hospital, not putting nearly as many people on ventilators. It's just not. Case numbers have spiked incredibly. But from what I understand, and a lot of folks think that those will go down as fast as they went up, massive spike. But I think from a political standpoint, new mayor just in office, and he's not going to do anything extreme right off the bat, nor do I think he'll do anything extreme, period. But we're going to have to wait to see. He campaigned on doing some stuff, solving our homeless issue and a bunch of other stuff. And I was more in line with that than I was the other candidates who are typically just, anything left leaning. Oh, let's do it. It's a good idea. And I make fun, but a lot of the issues that I see happening, like this eviction moratorium, should have never been put in place in the first place. You got to work it out. If you lose your job, you got to go out and find another job, and you've got to make this happen. I don't want to see anybody get kicked to the curb, because that's not good. We've already got, with the recent counting system in the City of Seattle, I just did a podcast where I talked about there possibly being over 40,000 homeless people in Seattle. We don't need more people getting kicked to the curb and ending up homeless, right? But we've also had this eviction moratorium, and in my opinion, should have never happened, because the landlords basically didn't have anything to protect them. And millions upon millions of dollars of federal aid has still yet to hit the system. It's just been this big debacle. So I think the faster that you release these moratoriums, other parts of the country never had a moratorium, and they're doing just fine. They didn't have this whole moratorium put in place because, in my opinion, they're reasonable, and you don't put these things in place. It's like shutting down the economy. You don't shut the economy down because you've got a virus going around. You just don't. You figure out how to keep those who are most impacted by it. You get them out of the way. You protect them. Everybody else does their thing, kind of like what we're talking about doing now, which is just kind of going back to regular life. They're doing this in Europe. They're talking about doing this in Europe. And I think it's long overdue. You just learn to live with it like you do the flu, because you've got the vaccines, you got all that good stuff. And another one of my big things is with this eviction moratorium is, all right, the worst of the pandemic was in winter of 2020, right? So if you lost your job then, all right, I get it. You probably need some time. Well, those 6 extensions that we had, those pretty much gave you the break that you needed. If you haven't been able to figure out how to get a job and work your way back into housing of some sort in the year and a half since that time period, I question how hard you are working at doing that, because we have a massive labor shortage, and you can figure out a job somehow, somewhere. It's not like we've got this labor market where nobody's hiring. Everybody's hiring. If you can't figure out how to make that go, I'm sorry, you're not trying very hard. And that's the position I take, is landlords throughout this process have been making their mortgage payments. They've been making their insurance payments. They've been maintaining their properties. Sometimes they're covering utilities, all of these expenses. It's such a one-sided equation that this should have just never happened in the first place, in my opinion. So there you go. All right. So let's just take a quick look-see and see what we've got as far as, the mayor's office says Harrell will extend the moratorium through executive order, pushing residential evictions, small business and nonprofit commercial tenant evictions back yet another 30 days. It drives me crazy. Seattle is just there. There's that fine line between not wanting to kick folks out that are struggling. But I think we've been way past that for a long time. And yet we've still got this narrative of, well, this many people are behind on their rent and therefore they might get kicked to the curb. And yet across the United States, you're not seeing those eviction numbers go up dramatically like so many of the media stories that you've probably looked at. And so everybody's like, oh, you can't reduce those eviction moratoriums now because you might have 11 million Americans become homeless. Those stories are not accurate. Just because you're behind on your rent and just because you think your landlord might evict you, that isn't enough of a reason to continually kick these moratoriums out just out of fear of what might happen. Hey, here's a thought. It also might not happen. And in other areas of the country, statistically, it looks like that has been the case. You haven't had mass evictions, have you? You've always got a certain percent of the population that's going to get evicted, because that is unfortunately how life goes. Sometimes people are down on their luck. They run out of their luck. And in a city like Seattle, we've got so many safety nets in place that I'm kind of like, you know what? It's been long enough. Take off those moratoriums. You've got to give these landlords the ability to control their own assets like they should have been able to do throughout this entire time. And yet we've gone down such these crazy little roads of, free rent. Just crazy. So because we've had this rapid surge, I think, in coronavirus, not politically the best month to probably eliminate the eviction moratorium. So I get it. And at this point in time, a lot of folks are like, well, it's one more month. Well, it's one more month that these landlords who have been struggling for 2 years, it's one more month that these landlords have to suffer through. And arguably with the whole, winter months eviction moratorium that comes around every 25% of the year, you've got an eviction moratorium anyway in Seattle. That's just how we operate. And people wonder why rents are going through the roof. People wonder why they can't find housing. It's because of policies like this. Policies like this. Who would want to have a rental property in Seattle? If that's your business and that's what you're used to doing, great. But you're not going to have folks from the outside. You know what? I can buy a rental anywhere in the United States. I think I'll go to Seattle because I've heard that it's a really good environment for investing in rental property, specifically residential 1 to 4 units. I hear that is a spectacular. You just don't hear that from the standpoint of appreciation. I mean, where else are you going to go that you're going to get a bigger return than Seattle? I mean, very few markets in the United States. There are people that are continuing to buy residential property, but why wouldn't you buy just outside of Seattle? That's what I think is happening. Don't buy inside the city limits. That's a knucklehead move. Buy outside. But, to each their own. If you want to go down that road and do your thing. So Harrell is also forming an interdepartmental team to handle support funds and improve data collection on the ongoing moratorium. The city will develop an outreach plan for Seattle tenants at risk of eviction, educating them of their rights while also providing utility assistance for tenants and small landlords. An advisory group will evaluate the city's coordination with regional governments and providing financial assistance and report back to Harrell. The issue with a lot of this is getting the money from the federal coffers into the state coffers, into the local coffers. And that has been taking longer than expected, especially here in King County. It's a train wreck. I mean, a lot of things in King County are just a train wreck. Let's be honest. And folks say, but you're the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. You're supposed to be a cheerleader for King County and Seattle. Well, I am, but part of that is being honest and being reasonable. And there's a lot of stuff that's just kind of crazy. And people want to hear about the insanity as well. I mean, it's just what we're doing. So the mayor he's going to do some studies. He's going to talk about helping out the landlords. He's going to talk about, comprehensively collecting and analyzing needed data. I get bored when I hear that stuff, but it's probably necessary. I would just be one of those guys where, I don't really care if I get thrown out of office. This moratorium, it's not moving forward. It's done. It's all done. I'm in office now. You guys need to work this out, need to figure this out. We're going to take care of people as best we can. We've already got systems in place to do that. But if you're a landlord, it's go time, folks. You can now do what you need to with your asset within the confines of the law. We're not talking about anything crazy. We're just talking about if you're not getting paid as per whatever contract you set up with your tenant, if you're not getting paid, then you have the right to evict. A basic concept that somehow, I don't know how we went so off track there. It's crazy. Local housing advocacy groups and landlord groups have been critics of the eviction moratorium these last couple of years. Really? Yeah, I mean, not surprising, right? Let's see. I can't kick him out. I can't really do anything. He's ripping apart my house. What do I do? Those are some of the questions that are out there, right? And it's not the rule, but if you're a landlord and you've got somebody in your house that you're having a real tough time with, it's very difficult to evict in Seattle right now. It's happening, but it's very, very difficult because we've got all this other stuff going on. So the article kind of goes on to describe one of those, issues where somebody went on sabbatical. They came back at the end of when they said they were going to. And even though they had a lease, the tenant is like, I think we're just going to hunker down here. And that's what you hear a lot of from the landlord side of things is situations where people are taking advantage. They're taking advantage of the fact that they know that everybody else knows that they don't have to pay. And if they want to hunker down, they certainly can. And guess what? There's not much that you can do about it. We even, for the low income population here in Seattle, we give them free attorney advice. I mean, free-addle is not that big of a stretch. I mean, damn near anything. If you're homeless, you can make a call and, you're going to get a tent. You're going to get some other necessary items. You start getting support. It's crazy. And we wonder why we have maybe over 40,000 homeless people in the city of Seattle. And if you question that number, you can check out my podcast where last few days, there's a point in time federal count that happens in every major city over, is it 50,000 people? Something along those lines. Every major city in January does a point in time count where they go out and do a one night count of the homeless population. And in Seattle, we're not doing that because it's Seattle. And we're coming up with another metric that's more accurate. And by accurate, we mean way more numbers that, to me, 40,000 people in the streets of Seattle homeless. I'm having a hard time believing that. But then again, I don't have anything that says, no, that's not the case. That just seems like an incredible surge from the 12,000 or 10,000 or 12,000 that we've historically reported as being homeless. Now, we know we've had an upswing with the whole CDC saying don't sweep out homeless encampments. We know that the homeless population has expanded because of that, not only physically with their tents and their structures and their couches and their barbecues. And I've got a small homeless encampment near where my boat is. And so I drive by and I kind of just see what's going on. Christmas Eve, was it Christmas Eve? I think I went over to check to make sure all the lines were good. And this guy, it's underneath a freeway, number one. It's underneath a freeway. And this guy had his barbecue out in front of the tent. He had a bonfire going. I mean, it was like a stand-up bonfire going in the middle of winter, and nobody's really saying much. It's just, oh yeah, he's keeping warm. All right. But yeah, you're keeping warm with propane and it's just, going crazy. So, we've got stuff like that happening on the regular. And, I think it is time. It's time. These eviction moratoriums, they've got to be lifted because you're not going to be able to convince me that it's much different now than it was 6 months ago, than it was 6 months before that. There's just no data that says, hey, we should be doing this. It's just we've gone this one direction of, yeah, landlords, screw them. All right, tenants, free rent for whatever if you believe that you're impacted by, the Rona. So we're at that point in the marketplace where things have gone on for too long. I'll give a hall pass for another month, okay, just for being reasonable. But this next month comes, and I think this eviction moratorium needs to go away because otherwise people are going to scream even more than they already are. Unfortunately, in a city like Seattle, those voices are not heard, and they're very much in the minority because we just basically enable a lifestyle here that is possibly different than other parts of the country. Let's just leave it at that. How about that? Okay. Freaddle 2022. It's what we're doing. All right. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for being a part. Love to have you subscribe, hit that like button, leave me a comment, share the content. That gets it out there. And then more people see it. And then we can kind of continue doing what we're doing here. So thanks again for being part. I'll catch up with you soon. Talk then. Bye for now.